but it's hard. And it's lonely. It's very lonely. I just know that if that loneliness can exist, so can other things, and I will be okay. And to everyone who hates when I win, the winged victory came to the Louvre in pieces, and people still line up to see her. And I can only hope that despite my flaws, and despite my cracks and my breaks, and there are many of them.
Before we dive into one of the most bizarre and chilling mysteries to ever hit Hollywood, make sure to subscribe if you love deep dives into unsolved cases, hidden truths, and shocking celebrity mysteries. Trust me, this one is going to leave you speechless. So, imagine you spend over $250 million on a live-action remake of a beloved Disney classic, hype it up for years, cast a rising star as the lead, and then it crashes harder than a Disney Plus password share crackdown. Opening weekend, $43 million. For Disney, that's not just a flop. That's a reputation-threatening, investor-sweating disaster. And at the center of it all, Rachel Zegler, a breakout star turned unexpected internet villain, caught in the PR crossfire of political rants, fairy tale hot takes, and dwarves who apparently aren't dwarves anymore. Yeah, buckle up. Because this is the chaotic, awkward, and very expensive downfall of Disney's live-action Snow White, and how one movie managed to tick off fans, critics, and the entire internet. Once upon a time, not even that long ago, Disney thought it had another live-action mega hit in the bag. Riding high off the success of Beauty and the Beast and Aladdin, the Mouse House greenlit a live-action Snow White remake with a budget so big it made Cinderella's glass slipper look like a clearance item. Over $250 million went into production, marketing, and what we can only assume was a very long Zoom call about what not to say during press interviews. The star? Rachel Zegler, fresh off West Side Story, hailed as the next big thing. Young, outspoken, and clearly talented, she had the Disney machine fully behind her. But then, cracks started to show. Rachel wasn't just doing the usual promotional rounds. She started, very publicly, calling out the original 1937 Snow White, labeling the film as outdated, anti-feminist, and something she wouldn't let her kids watch. Oof! And listen, reimagining a classic, that's Hollywood 101, but trashing the source material your entire movie is based on? That's like opening a vegan restaurant and roasting tofu on day one. Audiences weren't thrilled. Disney purists were offended. And the internet? It started sharpening its pitchforks. Then came the dwarfs controversy, or as Twitter labeled it, Dwarfgate 2025. Instead of casting actors with dwarfism, Disney announced they'd be replacing the 7 dwarfs with CGI magical creatures. Why? According to insiders, it was an effort to be more inclusive and progressive. But somehow, they ended up making everyone mad. Advocacy groups criticized the erasure of roles for dwarf actors. Longtime fans slammed the film for disrespecting the original characters, and people just weren't buying the creature angle, Snow White and the 7. What now? Meanwhile, Rachel kept digging. Between red carpet sound bites and social media posts, she came off as, let's say, less than enthusiastic about the film she was starring in. Her political opinions also got roped into the mess, which, in a vacuum, might have been fine. But combined with all the other drama, it added gasoline to an already dumpster-sized fire. She was accused of being dismissive, arrogant, even combative in interviews. Her co-stars reportedly grew tense behind the scenes. Rumors swirled of on-set disagreements. By the time the movie finally premiered, the vibe wasn't Disney magic. It was more like awkward family dinner where no one wants to make eye contact. And when box office numbers dropped, the internet exploded. Opening weekend rolled around, and it was a bloodbath. Despite months of marketing, viral debate, and a budget that could buy an actual castle, Snow White pulled in a measly $43 million. Against that towering $250 million budget, it was DOA. To make matters worse, some theater chains allegedly cut screenings due to low ticket sales. Fans mocked the film's visuals, slammed the soulless CGI, and questioned every single casting decision. The Rotten Tomatoes audience score? Brutal. The critic reviews? Not much better. And Rachel? She went radio silent for a while, only to pop back up with vague tweets about learning and growing. By then, the damage was done. She went from Hollywood's next darling to a walking PR cautionary tale. Disney scrambled to salvage the narrative, but the online discourse had already been hijacked by memes, reaction videos, and people asking if this was the company's worst remake yet. Even hardcore Disney stans were calling it a misstep, citing forced messaging, tone-deaf creative changes, and a lack of emotional heart. And let's not forget the final twist. Reports that Disney might pull international rollouts or scale back future live-action projects altogether. Yup, Snow White didn't just flop, it sent ripple effects through the entire kingdom. So, what have we learned from this fairy tale gone off the rails? Maybe, just maybe, if you're remaking a beloved childhood classic, don't alienate the exact people who grew up loving it. Maybe cast chemistry and fan trust matter more than Twitter buzz, and maybe, just maybe, you don't need to turn every single IP into a billion-dollar morality play. Rachel Zegler may bounce back. Hollywood loves a redemption arc. And Disney will, of course, be fine. They've still got Marvel, Star Wars, and Mickey Mouse printing money in the background. But this mess? This was the cinematic equivalent of stepping on a rake in front of a live studio audience. Congratulations to Snow White, 2025, for winning the prestigious Most Likely to Be Pulled from Disney Plus Without Warning award. May your dwarfless legacy live on in film school cautionary tales and YouTube retrospectives. What did you think of the drama? Did Disney go too far? Was the backlash fair? Drop your thoughts in the comments, and while you're here, don't forget to subscribe for more celebrity chaos, Hollywood faceplants, and million-dollar meltdowns. Because in this kingdom, the tea is always piping. You'd think a studio as polished as Disney would have seen the signs. But according to some insiders, the warning bells were blaring long before anyone even saw the first trailer. Let's talk about the production itself. Reportedly, the shoot was plagued with rewrites, reshoots, and last-minute direction changes. The tone kept shifting, from gritty feminist reboot to whimsical musical and back again, leaving the final product with all the cohesion of a group project where no one read the instructions. The creative team couldn't seem to agree on what kind of Snow White this was supposed to be. Was it an empowering modern tale? A nostalgic tribute to the original? A CGI-fueled fantasy epic? Spoiler, it tried to be all three, and in the end, it felt like none of them. Then, there was the issue of the costume and set design, which drew side eyes for looking more like a TikTok cosplay than a $250 million Disney film. Think less Once Upon a Time and more Once Upon a Deadline. Viewers couldn't decide if it was intentionally camp or unintentionally cheap. Either way, it didn't scream prestige remake, more like AI-generated Renaissance Fair flyer. And let's not forget the leaked on-set photos. Those low-res paparazzi shots that hit the internet months before the official trailer. You remember, the ones with what appeared to be a mix of full-sized actors in peasant clothes walking through a field, giving serious off-brand Lord of the Rings energy. The memes practically made themselves. Even before the film released, public confidence was already in the gutter. A major point of contention in Snow White's marketing was Disney's insistence on promoting the film as a feminist reimagining. Cool in theory, but execution? That's where things went sideways. The messaging was less empowering new vision and more apology tour for the original classic. It came across like they were embarrassed to even be making Snow White, which is a bold stance when your entire film is, Snow White. Rachel Zegler's soundbite, "She's not going to be saved by the prince and she won't be dreaming about true love," became the lightning rod. Instead of rallying excitement, it sparked debates about rewriting character arcs just to make a point. Critics accused the film of stripping away core emotional stakes in favor of modern ideology. And here's the thing. audiences aren't anti-updates. Just look at Maleficent or Cruella. Those worked because they added depth without erasing everything people loved in the first place. In this case, people felt like they were being talked down to. Like Disney wasn't updating a fairy tale, they were correcting it. That kind of messaging? It doesn't sell tickets. It sells snarky YouTube reactions and think pieces titled, "Why Hollywood Keeps Failing Gen Z." Let's talk casting, because beyond Zegler's polarizing press presence, the very look of the film sparked online debates faster than you can say, algorithm boost. Rachel Zegler's casting as Snow White became a lightning rod for culture war discourse, especially when paired with her comments about how we've already seen that story and it's not 1937 anymore. While some cheered the modern twist, others accused Disney of intentionally provoking controversy to generate buzz. And honestly, it kind of backfired. Instead of the usual pre-release hype, Disney found itself in the middle of a messy internet discourse hurricane. There were trending hashtags demanding boycotts, conspiracy threads about Disney's woke agenda, and worst of all, tons of apathy from the middle-of-the-road crowd, aka the people who usually buy the most movie tickets. The discourse was so intense that even Zegler stans started quietly backing away. Her interviews began trending for the wrong reasons. Her past tweets were dug up and dissected. It was like watching someone lose a PR battle in real time, with popcorn and receipts. Oh, and did we mention Gal Gadot was in this movie too? As the evil queen? Yeah, she was barely featured in the marketing. Some fans joked she was being held hostage by the studio's PR team to avoid making things worse. Others just forgot she was in the movie altogether. Justice for Gal, honestly. We can't understate how weird the decision to CGI the dwarfs was. Peter Dinklage famously criticized the original Snow White story for its portrayal of dwarfism, which sparked a much-needed conversation. But Disney's response? Not to rework the characters respectfully with real actors, but to create CGI creatures vaguely inspired by woodland spirits? It felt less like progress and more like a boardroom panic button. And the execution? Let's just say the CGI looked like it was rendered on a Nintendo Switch. These magical beings didn't have names, backstories, or even personalities. They were just there, floating in the background like unfinished side quests. Even longtime Disney fans were like, wait, why are we calling this Snow White if there are no dwarfs, no prince, no romance, and barely any mirror-related drama? It became a full-on identity crisis. You know things are bad when the memes are outperforming the marketing. Clips of Zegler's interviews were remixed into TikTok audios. Twitter was flooded with fake posters. Snow woke, Snow May, Snow fight. One viral post showed a CGI dwarf doing Fortnite dances with the caption, "We're losing storytelling." People weren't just mocking the movie. They were mourning what it could have been. And let's be honest, Disney has been running on nostalgia fumes for years. But this felt like the moment when the engine finally sputtered. The Snow White disaster became the poster child for what happens when corporate branding meets audience fatigue. Even other studios took notice. You could practically hear the brakes screeching on greenlit reboots. Cinderella? Frozen live action? Maybe not right now, maybe never. So where does Disney go from here? Internally, the studio is already rumored to be slashing budgets for future live-action projects. Some insiders say executives are reevaluating the entire remake strategy. Others claim Snow White's failure could shift priorities back to original content, or at least content with less social media baggage. And Rachel Zegler? She's still set to appear in The Hunger Games, The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, and other projects, but her star power has taken a serious hit. PR teams across Hollywood are likely rewriting media training manuals as we speak. As for audiences, there's growing fatigue with the remake machine. People are craving authenticity, not algorithm-optimized storytelling. And if Snow White taught us anything, it's that you can't sell nostalgia while actively dissing the thing people are nostalgic for. In the end, Snow White 2025 didn't just flop, it detonated. What started as a bold reimagining turned into a cautionary tale. A film that tried to modernize a fairy tale but forgot to keep the magic. a lead who meant to empower but accidentally alienated, a studio trying to read the room but listening to the wrong room entirely. Will Hollywood learn from this? Probably not. But we'll be here when the next gritty reboot of Bambi drops with a $300 million budget and a nihilistic twist ending. Until then, tell us, was Snow White doomed from the start, or did it self-sabotage on the way down? Drop your takes in the comments, spicy ones encouraged, and hit that subscribe button for more beautifully disastrous pop culture breakdowns. Because fairy tales may end with a kiss, but in Hollywood, they tend to crash with a quote tweet. Here's something that doesn't get talked about enough. Disney has built such a massive empire on nostalgia that it's now completely trapped by it. When the Mouse House touches a property like Snow White, they're not just remaking a movie, they're tinkering with something woven into the fabric of people's childhoods. And when you start changing the recipe, removing key ingredients, rewriting characters, or dunking on the original, it's not seen as innovation, it's seen as betrayal. Think about it. Disney practically invented the modern princess archetype, and for decades it owned that lane. But now, it's like they're not sure how to handle that legacy. Do they lean into tradition, or burn it down to make room for a new era? With Snow White, they tried to split the difference, and ended up pleasing no one. Instead of celebrating the film's roots and giving it a thoughtful update, they disowned the past while failing to deliver anything new that resonated. That's not evolution. That's a brand identity crisis. And when your brand is literally magic, you better believe people notice when the sparkle's gone. Let's talk about the other elephant in the room, Rachel Zegler's relationship with social media. In this era, actors are their own brand ambassadors. They do the press tours, the late-night interviews, the viral TikToks. And while that can be a huge asset, it can also be a PR ticking time bomb. Zegler's digital footprint became a battleground. Fans dug up old tweets. Clips of her interviews were edited and re-edited to make her seem smug, dismissive, or hypocritical. And before long, she was the centerpiece of a full-blown internet pile-on. Now, was some of that exaggerated? Absolutely. But in the court of public opinion, nuance dies first. And here's the kicker. The more she tried to clarify herself, the worse it got. "I didn't mean to disrespect the original," she'd say. And then, 2 days later, another clip would surface of her dragging the 1937 version for being creepy and not for modern audiences. It's like watching someone try to put out a fire by dumping gasoline with a ladle. The lesson here? Studios need to stop handing actors these ultra-loaded talking points without prepping them for the storm that's coming. You can't toss feminist reboot and subverts expectations into a press kit and expect the internet to take it calmly. This is not 2016. We are post-Barbenheimer. The audience is smarter and way more cynical. Let's pivot to another underrated element of this collapse, the expectation mismatch. Disney hyped this film for years. First, it was the casting. Then, the behind-the-scenes peeks. Then the endless interviews about how different this Snow White would be. At one point, they even teased new original songs from award-winning composers. This was supposed to be prestige Disney, okay? So when the trailer finally dropped and looked like a streaming original with zero charm and a trailer color-graded within an inch of its life, the internet imploded. Where was the magic? Where was the music? Where was the reason to care? The backlash wasn't just about the film itself. It was about the gap between what people were promised and what they actually got. It's the same reason the Mulan remake stumbled, or why The Little Mermaid drew mixed responses despite a strong lead performance. Disney keeps dangling the idea of something new and daring, but the final products almost always land in this awkward, uncanny valley between soulless reboot and half-baked reinvention. It's like they keep trying to reinvent the wheel, but it's square. This brings us to a bigger, more existential question. Are we finally done with the live-action remake trend? For over a decade, Disney's business model has been built on rehashing its animated classics. Some of them, to be fair, worked. Cinderella, 2015, was charming. The Jungle Book had solid visuals. Beauty and the Beast made bank. But after a while, the magic wore off. Audiences started to ask, why does this exist? With Snow White, the cynicism finally caught up. The formula didn't just fail, it imploded. The emotional core was missing, the visuals felt off. And the story? Stripped of romance, wonder, and heart, it felt like a checklist of buzzwords glued together by corporate fear. If anything, Snow White's failure might force Disney to reevaluate its pipeline of legacy IPs. Because let's be real, do we need a live-action Hercules where Hades is a TikTok influencer? Or Bambi with photorealistic trauma? Probably not. So what happens to Rachel Zegler after this? On paper, she's still a bankable name. She has the voice, the screen presence, and a growing filmography. But Snow White proved something crucial. Audiences don't just care about talent, they care about vibes. If an actor is seen as inauthentic, arrogant, or too online, it sticks. Even if it's unfair, the narrative becomes hard to shake. Now Zegler is stuck in that weird Hollywood limbo where public opinion is teetering and future roles are being watched very closely. She'll need a full-blown redemption arc, and fast. And that sucks, honestly, because underneath the PR missteps and social media mess, she is incredibly talented. But when you become the face of a $250 million flop, the fallout follows you. And as every actor in a DC movie knows, no one forgets a high-profile L. Let's take a quick trip into the executive boardroom, because you better believe heads were spinning at Disney HQ when those preview numbers came in. Insider reports say the studio was already nervous weeks before release. Early test screenings didn't go well. Merch sales were down. Even internal marketing teams were struggling to position the film. At one point, there were talks of delaying the international rollout to try and rework the narrative. But the problem was never the timeline. The problem was the product. And when the flop became official, executives pivoted faster than Elsa freezing a fjord. Suddenly, Snow White wasn't being pushed as a franchise reboot. It was quietly, awkwardly buried in the press cycle. Disney even started distancing itself from the film in interviews. You could almost hear Bob Iger sighing from a mountain somewhere. You know what's even more terrifying to Disney than bad box office? Dead merch. The Snow White toy line? Basically non-existent. No dolls flying off shelves, no costumes, no lunchboxes. It was like the Disney store collectively ghosted the entire production. Why? Because kids weren't interested. The story wasn't connecting. The aesthetic wasn't exciting. And let's be honest, the Dwarfless ensemble didn't exactly scream playtime. For a company that runs on merchandise profits, this was a disaster. You could practically hear the spreadsheet bleeding. Here's the poetic irony of it all. Snow White 2025 may have tanked in theaters, but online? It's immortal. It will live forever in TikTok skits, YouTube essays, and Twitter compilations. People will be quoting Zegler's interviews for years. She's not going to be saved by the prince is the new let them eat cake. And in that sense, this isn't just a bad movie. It's a cultural artifact. The moment Disney's legacy crashed headfirst into modern discourse. The fairy tale that turned into a thread of unskippable L's. The film that somehow made people nostalgic for Enchanted. So congrats, Snow White 2025. You may not have won hearts, but you earned a permanent seat in the Hall of Pop Culture Meltdowns, right between Cats and Morbius. If there's a takeaway here, it's this. Audiences know when something's built by committee. You can't force girl boss energy onto a fairy tale with $1 billion budget and expect it to stick. You can't throw out beloved characters and expect no one to notice. And you definitely can't market a movie with disdain for its own roots and still expect people to line up for popcorn. At the end of the day, fairy tales survive because they resonate, not because they trend. So, your move, Disney. And for the rest of us, let's keep watching the chaos unfold, because if there's one thing Hollywood does better than fantasy, it's unintended comedy. What's your take on this train wreck? Did you see it coming? Would you still watch a live-action Tangled or Frozen? Drop your hot takes in the comments, and subscribe for more disaster deep dives, celebrity chaos, and the kind of content that doesn't need 7 CGI creatures to tell a good story. Until next time, stay messy, stay skeptical, and never trust a reboot with no heart.